This is a summary of a coach education session given to coaches in Temple Oak Sing Street Gaelic Football Club on the topic of warm-ups and getting ready for sport. The focus of this part of the session was on some basic principle of sports-related preparation, i.e. warm-ups, to see what frameworks were available, which ones worked best and have some evidence behind them, and how we could draw from the best part of these structured warm-up programs and to build a warm-up routine for your own team. Not until relatively recently did we start to see an evidence-based build to support the concept of structured warm-ups and what elements of a warm-up should have, and start to see and understand how much of an influence they had on injury reduction during the sports activity. FIFA, the international soccer body, gathered some of the early standardizing programs and developed their own FIFA 11 Plus warm-up protocol, which is worth a look. This program built on some of the athletic development themes we discussed previously, and places a strong focus on progressively increasing the concept of neuromuscular activation, as in turning the body on, plyometrics and agility drills during the early part of a sports session. So it's certainly worth looking at some of those other programs to get an idea of the common themes and practices. Since the introduction of the FIFA 11 Plus program, there has been a massive build-up of evidence to support how effective these programs are in reducing the burden of injury. This has been across several different sports for both genders and across a wide span of age. The list seen here is by no means exhaustive on this area, but gives a sample of a wider body of research suggesting how important it is that coaches become familiar with these protocols if we want to have an effect on injury prevention and in fact performance. As the evidence emerged to suggest that structured warm-ups is a good idea for the health of our players, the GAA developed and adapted the soccer-based model to be more tailored and suited to our games of football, hurling, camogie, and established a standard warm-up for the Gaelic games called the GAA 15. This talk, we won't go into too much details here as to the specific parts of the GAA 15, as that would take too long. I think that information is readily available online anyway. However, the TSS coaches should look and be aware at this program, be aware of it, and maybe adapt it to their own standardized warm-ups. It's reasonable to suggest that once some core themes and aspects of the program are adhered to, we can have the license to modify slightly to our own needs. On the LGFA website, there is outlined some of the key elements of some of the online resources which are readily available and fall in line with the GAA 15. These should be viewed by coaches for both male and female teams as they break down some of the key elements of the types of moves that we would like to reproduce in our warm-ups, and again while staying in line with the GAA 15 protocol. These programs follow similar themes really, and some of the basic principles might be players raising their heart rates in an incremental way, building in multi-directional movements and introducing those further complexities of that as the session goes on. This progressively increases the loads and the speeds involved of some of these more complex moves. While the difficulties increase, the environmental is at least semi-controlled and set by the coach and the norms within the way the players move, and but still has a little bit of flexibility to the individual player, and players can increase their own rates in a controlled way themselves. The whole concept behind it may be simply labelled as ways to get the body ready. In summary, standardizing warm-up techniques and protocols allows teams to get body ready in preparation for safe participation in sport. The evidence shows the importance of some key and essential central themes to these warm-up protocols that we need to include in our own variations of this in order for the warm-up program to be effective. The core themes can be summarized by the headings on this slide. The first one being the concept of neuromuscular activation. That basically means that we're getting the body to move in several different ways, but we're using quality and control and bringing awareness to those things. The introduction of the way we roll out this thing naturally in a common sense way starts with a low intensity and builds intensity as we go along, and that allows players with their own unique physiologies to adapt to the new high intensity workout at their own rate. A dynamic balance and moves with an emphasis on single leg stability. That means that I'm able to land on one leg and do something with that leg, like the plyometrics we talked about previously. One of the things to look out for in single leg and even double leg control is the way that our leg rotates, as in twists. Does it twist in, twist out, or is it able to maintain its position, its central position under force? This is especially important in the female player because of some of the unique anatomical points that differentiate male and females, and gives females a slight disadvantage when it comes to leg control. Hamstring readiness. This is a key muscle in our running and sprinting techniques. So we start slow in our running and we build up our speed. Some of the other movement strategies that were outlined with the LGFA slide previously are important here to introduce that hamstring to readiness. All of these programs should include landing and cutting mechanics, and as I said, this really means the plyometrics and coordination elements of moving our bodies. Coaches need to be involved here. A spot and cue approach, as in coaches are not just talking about the game, we're actually involved looking at what's happening to our players' mechanics. When you see something askew, something that doesn't look right, doesn't look controlled, we need to be able to say, let's get on and fix that up, just with a battery of words that the players recognize to fix. Consistency is such an important part of this. This won't be effective in preventing injuries unless it is done consistently and regularly, and with a background of FMS, that will really help and make this an important part. Some of the frustrations that have been stated about these standardized protocols is that they're largely absent from the ball that we're going to play a whole match with, and that might not be introduced until 20-25 minutes into their session, which it does not suit, and it causes a build-up of anxiety amongst the coaches, which is a fair criticism. So we have to think about ways to get not just body ready, but also ball ready, and then progressing that to game ready. One way to address this frustration is to employ an overarching framework which we call the RAMP framework. This allows us to build in a standardized body ready, ball ready and game ready regiment. The RAMP is an acronym. The R stands for to raise, the A for activate, M for mobilize, and P for potentiate, which may seem an unfamiliar word, but it hopefully makes sense as we go through this explanation. The raise is obviously increasing your core body temperature, your heart rate, respiratory rate, all those physiological functions, and we covered that when we talked about starting low and increasing high across our intensity of movements. We can think about the activate and the mobilize as being the core elements of our standardized protocols, like your GEA 15 movement strategy, but also would encourage here to start introducing a ball into some of those movements. That can be done with a ball, just with some slight modifications. The potentiate is really the end of the GEA 15, the higher aspects of that, where there's more explosive movements and high intensity forces and a sport performed in a sport specific way. Now, this can be done in mini possession games like we would typically do at the end or towards the end of a GEA warm-up strategy. Employing the overarching overarching ramp framework allows us to adapt our warm-up to our unique circumstances. Whether it's a younger age group, as in the Go games, an under 8s warm-up is going to look completely different than an adult's, but yet you can still follow the same themes with an incremental raise in game focused activity and physiological activations. Training as well versus games, this is a different context completely, but we should still practice some of the core elements in our training sessions. Sometimes we're training with small numbers versus big numbers and how that might look. Again, once you need to adapt your warm-up for this variable, but following the ramp protocol just ensures that you will continue to do those essential parts of it. To finish up, and to serve as an example, I'll just talk through the warm-up we used for the adult women's 2 team for this year 2025. We would typically start with a drill we call the hashtag drill, which is when players are running in straight lines and no change of direction, so a lower metabolic load where they run and some interplay passes with the ball, and they run from their own colour back and forth, but linking up with other players around them. This is straight line running. It's relatively low intensity. As I said, no change of direction, so not a big physiological load. They have to communicate. They have to decide when to run, when not to run, and there's a lot of hand and ball coordination involved. We would then typically go into some of our GAA 15 moves. We would do this as a flat team going back and forth from 2 lines. Some teams like to do this in with following the leader type lines, maybe 4 lines for the whole team. Our preference was to do it as a flat unit going back and forth, just working through our dynamic moves. Again, this is low intensity, but we do start building intensity towards the end when we introduce some running, 80% running, etc. There's a little bit of it's very quite linear at times, but we do build in some change of direction in terms of cutting under the player's control, bounding from one leg to the other across in a diagonal sense, sticking with one leg before moving again. And as we said, with the coach's cueing, progressively increase the speed that we do things at. We can also introduce a ball in here where we might, if we have enough balls for enough players, where they can solo back and forth. Otherwise, they might pair up in the classic old out and back moves. We can vary the way the ball gets given to one another, low balls, high balls, etc. At this stage of the warm-up, the players have increased their heart rate, their intensity. They're working a little bit of a sweat up, and now we want to get a really fast and explosive movement. So we might do this through some ladder drills or through some bunny hop drills. Again, we try to introduce some competition here, so they're fighting for a ball, even if it's in a relatively controlled setting. Fast feet and speed is emphasized here. It's being explosive in your actions. And then in towards the end of the warm-up, at this stage we feel like we're body ready and ball ready, maybe not game ready. So we might go into some small-sided games with various conditions that we can vary and keep fresh with the players, retaining the ball for five moves, scoring when you kick a pass 20 meters, etc. Or we might then progress into forwards versus backwards, or forwards versus backs, 3v3, 2v2. We can vary that up, and all players then like to do a little bit of scoring, so it's important to include some scoring practice, some kicking points from somewhere inside the arch. We would also encourage our goalkeeper at this stage to have a different coach to perform the coach keeper specific drills. So we're more or less there with a body ready, ball ready and game ready. This talk was a simple introduction into warm-ups and making awareness of the structured warm-ups that are out there and the evidence that is out there to support their use. So we as coaches need to be aware of that. We also need to be able to adapt our warm-ups to our needs and have the license to do that, and a little bit of an understanding of how they might work and what is important. There are plenty of resources out there to upskill yourself and for further reading. We have some on the Temple Oak Sing Street Coaches website, but there's other out there on GAA specific work, including Tobar and GAA.ie. Game Sense Coaching is another useful resource here. That is a paid subscription. John Murphy, who does a lot of sports science talks regarding GAA, is also there on YouTube and already available. Thanks again for listening.